Well, friends, welcome back to the Trisha Goyer Show. I have a friend here today. We're going to be talking about creativity. We're going to be talking about squirrels. We'll get to that in a minute. So many fun things. But first of all, welcome, Mike. This is Mike Nawrocki. Mike, why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, thank you, Trisha. It's so good to be here. Yeah, so my name is Mike Nawrocki. You may know me better as the voice of Larry the Cucumber, which
And once you say that, then you could just
yeah,
hear it.
you can maybe hear a little bit, but if I go up into my nose a little bit and maybe take it to a higher pitch, then it's full on Larry. Add a little squeak to it. That's all it takes.
I love it.
So I'm the co-creator of VeggieTales along with Phil Vischer, who's Bob the Tomato. So I spent most of my career with my business card reading writer, director, cucumber. But
I love it.
in the last 10 years, I've been off into new pursuits. I went and got my MFA in film writing and directing at Lipscomb University, which is where I teach now full time as a professor there. So I love that. And I've also in that time launched a new children's book series called the Dead Sea Squirrels,
Mhm.
and have animated that. So that's out now, and I'm excited to talk about that. I live near Nashville, Tennessee. I've been married to my beautiful wife Lisa now almost 30 years. We celebrate our 30-year anniversary this year, and
Awesome.
and have two grown children, Allie and Michael, who are both, we're recent empty nesters. So Michael and Allie are both out of the house now, thankfully living near us. So Allie lives in the kind of they both live in the city in Nashville. So, and we're just super proud of them, and they're both out of school and off to their own pursuits. And, they were involved in VeggieTales along the way as kid voices. And so, but
I
it's just,
didn't know that. I didn't know that they were kid voices.
yeah, so Allie took over as the voice of Annie the Onion for a number of years, who started off with Phil Vischer's daughter Shelby, and then when Shelby got when her voice got too old, Allie took over for a while, and then handed off the baton to Brian Roberts' daughter. Brian was a director of Big Idea for a number of years. So yeah, sort of passed the Allie baton along,
So
and so
cool.
or the Annie baton along. So and then Michael, helped out with some voices here and there. And he's I think it was in Pistachio, the Pinocchio version,
Uh-huh.
VeggieTales version that we did. We had like a little video. The we kind of upgraded the technology for Bob and Larry, so they would receive letters initially, but then they got emails, and then they got video. Then they got video messages. As technology advanced, and we actually filmed Michael, asking one of the questions as a kid. So he hates watching that because he's super young. He's got a buzz cut. He's got long hair, long flowing mane now, and everything. But he gets embarrassed every time we pull it back. But he was probably about 6 or 7 years old when we recorded that. So, but yeah, but it was great. I mean, that time in our lives raising kids with VeggieTales and having them involved was super fun.
I love that, and I talk about one of the things I talk about at conferences is follow your dreams, mom, but this would be follow your dreams, dad. Because
Yeah,
really, when our kids see us like doing the things God called us to, using our creative giftings, it just gives them like open doors in a way to fulfill the things that God has planned for them, and to like
yeah.
step into their own whatever He created them to do.
Yeah, yeah, and what's cool and maybe a little bit ironic about my kids is, I love the arts, and the arts were something that I was involved in with a passion growing up. I loved being in plays, I loved being in musicals, and singing in choirs and all that sort of thing. And like my mom and my dad were very opposite. My mom was very artistic. My dad was, very left brained, and and so I always felt I had a little bit of both in me. But I never saw that as a life for myself in the arts. For me, it was like, okay, I've got
Mm,
to get a real job. And so, but I love pursuing that. But with our, just as fun, and with our kids, I wanted to be more intentional. It's like, okay, I'm going to
mm.
get you guys piano lessons. We do the singing thing. And they were both like, they loved it, but it was funny because they didn't feel drawn to that as a career, And so it's like, oh no, maybe that's something dad does. I want to do something else. So my daughter's an attorney, and my son is on his way to becoming a physical therapist. So,
I love it, but
but they
that's
follow
what
their
interests them. Yeah.
yeah, that's what interests them, and they're loving it. And and it's great. And certainly, from a financial standpoint, the arts can be much more risky. So as a dad, I'm like,
Yes.
okay, you go for it.
Yes, my husband fully supports my writing career. I mean, on like, fully supports, like, in emotionally, supportive person, but also fully supports financially. I'm like, because all the trips, all the things I do,
Right. Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. Yeah. The promotional stuff and all of that. It can add up for sure.
yeah. Okay. So I want to go back a little bit to that creative nature, and you talked about like plays and all those types of things. Tell us a little bit about young Michael, and like when did you still feel like, okay, this is something I was created to do, and did you ever like question that?
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, young Michael. So I'll go back. So I grew up in a military family. My dad was career
Mm.
Air Force. He was an engineer, and then went into aerospace engineering. So we were all over the globe. I was born at Wright Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, and then moved to Tokyo, and then Southern California, Colorado, Washington, D.C., then back to Colorado, which is where I went to middle school and high school. So I was moving around a lot. Um, I mentioned, half of my family was musical and half of my family was more kind of, straight laced. My older brother, Bob, was just a tremendous guitar player. And I remember, he was 6 or 7 years older than me. So, or he is, he's still with us, thankfully.
I was like, you kept saying it was.
I
I'm
don't want
like,
to speak with it about Bob. Hey, Bob, how's it going? Don't want to talk about you in the past tense. But he's my half brother. My mom had been married before meeting my dad, and so, but Bob grew up with me, and so, but it was very much a role model because he was so much older than me,
Mhm.
and so I really admired his guitar playing, and he was pretty advanced, and he actually got a new guitar at one point and gave me his old guitar, which was kind of gummy. The frets were kind of gummed up and everything, and it needed to be cleaned. And but I was learning, for a while,
Yeah.
learned how to play, Free Bird and Sweet Home Alabama, and
Yeah.
the classics. And I started to get into it and loving it. And then I thought, so I got to clean this guitar because it's getting kind of, it's hard to play. And so I took it apart to clean it, and that was the end of my guitar playing career because I never put it back together. But I loved, but it was something that I loved, just music in general. But we grew up Catholic, and Nawrocki is a good Polish last name,
Mhm.
so Nawrocki, and so, but very culturally Catholic. And so I remember, I went to Catholic school for a number of years growing up. Did the whole CCD and all of that, but for us it was more of just this is what you did because it was in the culture, it was in the family, so we'd go
Mhm.
to church every once in a while, and went to Catholic school. But faith for me and for my family was just sort of in this kind of pocket of okay, well, this is just who we are as a family. My dad, in the context of being, in the military, we were living in Denver, and he got stationed to the Pentagon, and so he needed to go right away, and we couldn't sell our house. The market at that time, it was in the 70s, and things were really slow. And he ended up moving in with his commanding officer for a while as we tried to sell our house back home. And my dad, just he had an experience with Jesus. He came to the
Oh,
Lord, and
wow.
his commanding officer was a really strong believer. And so this cultural faith that we had been practicing all of a sudden became very real. And when we joined our dad, when we finally sold our house and moved out to Northern Virginia, we had a brand new dad. We're like, who is this man?
What's going on
Yeah,
here?
who is this guy? And so, but it was very transformative to the whole family. And within the next year, we had all come to Christ, and we were kind of looking for, a place to really plug into a church where we could practice, this living, breathing faith. And, we ended up at uh, uh, in Franconia, Virginia, little place called the Franconia Christian and Missionary Alliance. And we started to go there, and they had it was a small church, but they had a really dynamic youth group. And I just
Mm.
remember loving it. Was the first time I loved going to church because it's like, okay, there's really, friendly kids there, and I have fun. And they had like a little arts program. And so we would do plays and stuff. And so that's kind of where I just got started, like really, being able to sing or perform and have an audience, and I just love that. And then he was transferred back to Denver. He did not like his time at the Pentagon, so he was like, let me go back to Denver." So we moved back to Denver as a family, and just as I think it was my seventh or eighth grade year at that time. So I was still young, and got involved with another church, and again had a smaller church but a vibrant arts program. And so got involved in children's church as well. And they had this particular church had a Sunday school program, which was a Sesame Street ripoff called Caraway Street. I don't know if you or any of your listeners recall it, but it was a total Sesame Street ripoff.
Yeah.
But they would do, they built a whole set in the kids' church, and we'd have people coming in and out as live action and puppeteers. And so, but it was a great place to kind of cut my teeth and get used to it. And
Yes.
so, and I was I was kind of an athletic kid too. I mean, I love sports as well. So I was a swimmer and a tennis player and all that too. But I started, and my mom's side of the family in particular is very tall. My dad was, over 6 feet too, but my mom's brothers were like 6'7", 6'8". And so I started to get really tall in high school. And the taller I got, the more self-conscious I felt in front of people,
Mm.
because I was just this big, gawky,
Yeah.
thing standing up there. And I found a lot of solace in puppetry, because it's like, wait a minute,
Mhm.
I can hide behind a curtain and make people laugh, and I don't have to think about my physical presence so much,
Right.
So for me, that became a thing. And yeah, so I just love doing that. And but uh, again, with the missions emphasis of our church, the Christian and Missionary Alliance was the name of it. The missions was really forward in the church, and we had missionaries coming through all the time. And at youth conferences, we'd always hear about, you know, great things about being a missionary and all that. So I remember at my junior year of high school, I went forward at a youth convention and dedicated my vocation to ministry.
Wow.
And so it's like, I want to do that. I didn't feel like I was being called to become a pastor, because
Mhm.
again, I hated standing up in front of people and talking. And so, which is ironic because I do it all the time now as a professor,
Yeah.
but not comfortably. And so, um, but uh, but but I just looked at the models in my household, though. I mean, I love the arts, but my dad was an engineer. My older brother, though a musician, he was a chemistry major in college at the time. My mom was a painter, but also a nurse. So I said,
Mhm.
okay, well, they're doing all these artistic things for fun, but they've got real jobs. And so what do I do? So I made the decision in my 17-year-old brain that I was going to be a missionary doctor. So that's what I
Oh,
was going
okay.
to. That's what I was going to. That's how I was going to follow my calling. And so um, yeah, and so then I, at senior year, graduated high school, and then our denomination had a few denominational colleges around the country. The closest one to us was in the Minneapolis St. Paul
Mhm.
area, and there was a little college there called St. Paul Bible College. It started off in St. Paul, but then moved out to the western suburbs of Minneapolis, in an old Jesuit monastery, as a matter of fact,
Oh,
way out in the boonies.
wow.
It's still there. It's called Crown College now, and the building the building is in the shape of a cross, and the whole thing. So it's a really cool little campus. But I went out there to go to college, and my thought was, okay, well, I'll go here for a year or two. They didn't have a pre-med program, but I wanted to get some Bible classes out of the way, some general ed, and then I was going to transfer to a place to do pre-med. And so I went to this college. Every student was required to do a student ministry going in. And they had, kind of the typical things like, street witnessing and,
Mhm.
helping out different things. But one of the choices was a puppet team.
Oh, so
And so it's like, oh,
cool.
I've done puppets before. Plus, as everyone knows, that's where you go to meet girls, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Who can resist a puppeteer? and so and so I went out for the puppet team, and I made it. I made the puppet team. Um, yes, and so but that's where I met Phil. So Phil was equally nerdy, and kind of that kind of
On the
kid
puppet team. He was
on the
on the
puppet
puppet
on the puppet team. And so we just hit it off right away. We had very similar senses of humor. I was a big if you recall from the 70s and 80s, the Dr. Demento radio hour. I don't know if
Uh-huh.
that rings any bells, but it was a Sunday night radio show of parody music. It's where Weird Al Yankovic got his start and a bunch of
Yes.
other folks. And so I just loved parody music probably more than any other kind of music. So, and obviously you could probably tell with what ended up happening with Silly Songs, but I love that. I love, Mel Brooks movies. I love Monty Python, all that kind of weird stuff. And so did Phil. And so we just had a really great time writing and performing. And we ended up with some really weird puppet scripts that were super off the kind of chart to where you would expect a church puppets, so we would go around, and part of the ministry, we would just book these different church, events around. And so it was fun because we do our puppet shows and we'd hear, the kids giggling in the front, but then the adults in the back of the room just cracking up.
Yeah,
So
because
it's
they're
like,
getting it. Yeah.
yes, they're getting all the jokes. And so we like to say we roamed the Minnesota countryside, scaring the Baptists with our puppets. And yeah, so but yeah, that's where I just found so much joy in that. But I was, on my way to becoming a doctor, and and both Phil and I only went to that college for a year and a half. He wanted to go to film school. I wanted to go into med school, obviously, eventually. And so we were going to be roommates out in California. So we decided, okay, that's what we'll do. We'll go out to California, and you do film school, I'll do pre med, and so I moved back to Colorado after my sophomore or my third semester. So it was after the first semester of my sophomore year. He moved back to Chicago area where he was from, and we were going to kind of regroup for a semester, then go out to California. So yeah, but he got a job. He got an internship, and then by that summer they offered him a job. And
Okay.
so at a video post production company, and he gave me a call. I remember, and he thought, well, he's like, I don't think I'm going to go out to California because this is kind of what I want to do. So I feel like this is the place for me. And um, you know, I was roommateless then going out to California. And so I decided that, well, there's just as many places in, Chicago to do pre-med as there are in California. So maybe I'll do that. So, and the other thing that was happening too, is my parents were going through a divorce at that
Mm,
time too. And so, I was, back from college living in my parents' basement. They had not been separated yet, but there was all this tension in the house, and it was really hard to be there. And I just felt like, okay, I need to, and I was, already 19. I thought, okay, I just need to get out of here. And their money had dried up because, they can't, four boys going through a divorce, and, there was no money for college at that point. So it's like, okay,
right.
this is something I've got to figure out on my own. And so, yeah, so I packed up everything that I had in my 1980 red Ford Fiesta. And so, so I tell people it's the same car. If you watch the Cheeseburger song, the one that
Oh, yeah.
the one that pulls up to the drive-through, that was my car, modeled right after my car, and drove out to Chicago to to kind of start my life anew. And I ended up working there for just and because I was on my own for tuition. I enrolled at the University of Illinois Chicago, which is a public school there. But in order to get in-state tuition, which was much cheaper than just out-of-state tuition,
Right.
I needed to claim independence from my parents, and then just work there for a year until I was independent and could be a Illinois resident. And so that's what I did. And so I worked a bunch of odd jobs here and there, just to make a living. I was living with Phil's parents, at that point, and then just kind of working wherever I could. But then a spot opened up where Phil was working as and I had applied at UIC, and I got in, and I was, but I was just waiting to go for the next year. And so uh, this job opened up as a graveyard shift VHS duplicator at this place. And so
Wow. VHS
yeah,
duplicate.
VHS. And and I had, I had some technical stuff under my belt. I had run sound for my brother's band. He was in a band growing up in high school. I had toured with the Continental Singers, a summer in college, right after my freshman year in college, as a sound technician, so I had a little bit of
Yeah.
technical knowledge. And so, I was qualified enough to get this job. So I got this job, and I would, from 11 to 7, I would, start these 2-hour video cassette tapes. And then, I'd have a couple hours to just, just play around with the equipment, until I had to do the next. And so I started to figure stuff out, and I'd get invited out to go on shoots and audio, and Phil was doing this too, and it was one of the computer animation was just sort of emerging, and so was nonlinear editing and all this kind of this new technology. And the older generation that was working there at the time, they were a little less computer literate than Phil and I were, because we were super, kind of into computers.
Mhm.
If you can imagine nerdy puppet boys also being nerdy computer boys.
Yeah.
and so, and so, so eventually, so I kept working in video post production, and got, was doing it also through school. So I was doing pre med, and so I was a biology major, and studying biology. And then along the way, I fell in love with history. I was taking it as electives, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to double major in this. So it's like I was just a masochist. So I was just working full time and going to school full time, and I just loved learning. I think that's what it was.
Mhm.
And but my goal was still set on doctor. And so, but we were acquiring all this production knowledge and having fun going out with shoots and all this. And we were started talking about making a show. And I'm like, oh yeah, that'd be so much fun. But okay, I'll do that as long as I can. But then I gotta get
Gotta
going
get
on with
serious
this.
about this medicine
Yeah,
thing.
exactly. So, but we actually did a little thing for VeggieTale, or like a little promo, like it was a 3.5 minute promo for VeggieTales, where Bob and Larry came on and talked about what an amazing show VeggieTales would be. I think you can find it on YouTube. It's called Take 38, and and that's what Phil then took out to start raising money, to do, a whole episode, a whole half-hour episode. So he was doing that. I graduated. I was a double major, like I said, biology, history. I applied for the Peace Corps, and so my plan was I would go in, I'd go teach biology in Africa for 2 years, and then come back and go to medical school. And that would be, it would give me a little bit of practice, like on the mission field. Plus, it would look great on a medical school,
Right.
med school resume and all that. So, I graduated. I applied. Phil was out, looking to raise funds for, VeggieTales. Well, the very same month that he learned that I learned that I was accepted into the Peace Corps, we learned that we had funding for our first episode of Where's God When I'm Scared. And so
Wow.
that was a huge moment, of decision in my life, because I had put so much energy and time into this goal that I had. But I didn't, but this passion that I had for performing in the arts and all of that, I had so much fun doing it. And I just, you know, prayed about it and talked to a bunch of people who knew me best about what should I do. And, just, the confirmation that I heard back was, no, that, I'm gifted in this area and this is something that you should pursue. And so I turned down the Peace Corps, and we got to work on Where's God When I'm Scared. And yeah, the rest is history, I guess.
Wow. Does that have the song, God is Bigger Than the Boogeyman? Is
Yeah,
that on that one?
that's God is Bigger Than the Boogeyman. That's Where's God When I'm Scared, which had the story of Daniel, and then,
Mhm.
that very first one, which was Frankencelery, where Bob and Larry drop into his toy chest at night and sing God is Bigger. So yeah. So that was the start. And that was, I graduated high school in '84, and then finally I was on the 7-year plan in college. So I finally graduated high school or college in '91, and then that we got to work on that episode, and we finished it um, the just before Christmas of '93. So
Oh, wow.
1993. Yeah. So.
And that
Yep.
just changed everything, those little vegetables.
Those little vegetables. Well, it was so funny because it was such a crazy idea. The pitch was, okay, vegetables telling Bible stories, and everybody thought, okay, who are these kids? This is crazy. But we felt like, again, my heart was oriented missionally, and I had one idea in my brain of what that meant. But I found that, being able to tell stories and entertain kids in a way that help them to understand that God made them special and he loves them very much was
Mhm.
absolutely missional. And it was, story has such a powerful impact on how kids formulate their worldview, how they see things, and really shapes, kind of their idea of God. And so I think it was, God knew what he was doing in all of this, and I just kind of had to be open to, to following, the path that he was opening up for me.
Yeah, I love it, and just how that has just been a foundation. Like, my oldest daughter's 32, my oldest son's 35, so they were born in,
Wow.
what, 89 and 92,
Uh-huh.
and they
Yeah.
grew up with VeggieTales, like, that was around. I remember, I started a writers group, so this is when I
Uh,
was just starting to get writing in
uh,
Montana, and the
uh,
Christian bookstore owner, we invited him to come and speak. So
yep.
there's probably like 20 writers in the room, and
Uh-huh.
he brought VeggieTales. This is the first time I saw it. It was, Where's My Hairbrush? And he's like,
Nice.
I want you to see this. And he goes, this is what we need. We need something out of the box. And I'm thinking, of what? Like,
I know,
we
this
came
is
like, I don't
crazy.
know,
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
message he's going to give to us future writers. But he's like, you
yeah.
have to explore of new ways to reach in this generation and all this stuff. And that's when I first got a glimpse. Of course, then we went and bought the VHS.
Yeah,
We had all the VHSs of it. But even today, like my 22-year-old daughter, when I told her I was doing the podcast, which we're co-hosts of the Bible for Kids podcast, we'll just
that's right.
throw it on, like, go check that out. But
Yeah.
when I was talking to her about that, she's like, tell him every time I'm scared at night, I still see, God is bigger than the boogeyman. And so,
That's
like,
so
this whole
wonderful. Yeah.
generation after generation, these kids have this God's word. They're going to learn about things. They see the Bible stories, but in a fun way with these songs.
Yeah.
And it's so neat how God took, I mean, for you guys to be puppet people together, puppeteers together,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
you both get this job together. It's like you could see God's hand in it so much, but during the
Yeah.
time, you're just living your life,
Right,
and
right.
sometimes, like, our vision is where we think we're going isn't where God is taking us, but you're just stepping forward into what is being presented kind of at the moment.
Right, right. Yeah, and trying to be faithful to obedience in ways that you may not see, And so, I give a talk and I use Proverbs 16:9 as that verse that, kind of that keystone verse. We can make our plans, but the Lord determines our path, and
Hmm.
and I don't think there's anything wrong with making those plans and headed toward a direction where you feel your gifts and your calling lie. But, along with that, there's that idea of, that from Esther of, perhaps God has put you here for such a time as this, to
Hmm.
be able to maybe do something that you had not planned or seen for yourself, but you happen to be in that place and in that time for God to use you.
I love that. So we have the Dead Sea Squirrels, um, is the new thing that's happening. I want to make sure we get over
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
and I actually I bought the audiobook and listened to the first book, which is so cute. It's for kids, what, like 8 to 12? Is that the kind of age you're targeting?
Yeah, yeah, maybe a little younger. I'd
Okay.
say from when kids first start to read,
Okay.
through yeah, through 12. Yeah, I think
Okay.
so. So, yeah, the main characters in the show are 10-year-old fifth graders, and so, yeah, so that idea of early reader, and they're kind of the books are. Lightly illustrated. So if you can imagine Captain Underpants,
Mhm.
but the good version, yeah,
Yeah.
the wholesome version. But they're yeah, so they're maybe 8,000 words each. So just and with sort of illustrations to aid along the way. So just have gotten a lot of great feedback on, oh, my child was a reluctant reader and they just love reading these too. My child just loves to read, but they find these books so funny and they eat them up. And so it's great. During my VeggieTales years, I had one of the lines that we drew in the sand really early on with VeggieTales was to never depict Jesus as a vegetable, and that
Mm.
that that actually that was advice given to us by Phil's mom, Scotty May, who was she had her doctorate in Christian education, and she was a consultant for us for so many years. She was a teacher. She just retired at Wheaton College a couple years ago, but that was just something that we weren't going to do, which limited the number of obviously New Testament and gospel stories that we could
Right.
tell. We did versions of the Christmas and Easter story in various ways, but with VeggieTales, but we never could really dive into New Testament stories. And so I wanted a way to do that, and I had this idea in the back of my mind for many years. I came up with the bad pun first, Dead Sea Squirrels, and just started to formulate that. But when I left Big Idea full time in 2016, I started to develop that as an animated series and was, kind of pitching it around. And then Dan Lynch, whom you know very
Yep.
well. He and I had worked together on some VeggieTales stuff in the past. He said, "Hey, have you ever considered this as an early reader series?" And that wasn't my background at all, but but I thought it was a really cool idea to be able to develop it as books first. So I went away, did some research, and figured out, okay, this is how I could format it. And then he set up a pitch with Tyndale, and they loved the idea. And then I started writing the books in 2017, I think. So this idea that started off as, okay, I knew animation, I knew that world, but just it was a challenge to kind of to go to the book world. And as a screenwriter, which was what I was, it was so much fun to be able to write for books, because in screenwriting, you can't write what characters are thinking. You can't
Mm-hmm.
write kind of the narrator. It's like you have to show it. You have to show it, you have to see it. So it was really fun for me to do internal dialogue and narrative prose and all that kind of stuff. And so it was a fun thing for me. And the editors now that I've worked with, at Tyndale, have just been fantastic. And so I've just loved the process of writing the books, and did the 12 books, which obviously, or not, yeah, 12 books, which it turned into a 13 show animated series.
That is so cool. Okay, and they're so fun. So it's in book one where they discover the squirrels.
Uh-huh.
Explain the whole squirrel concept because they're looking. They're in the caves. Oh, well, you
Yes.
you explain it better than me. Yeah.
Sure, sure. So the overall concept was, wouldn't it be great, instead of to tell Bible stories, not to go back, to Bible times and retell it that way, because that's just been done so many times. What would it be like to bring characters forward from Bible times? And so,
Hmm.
so this idea of Encino Man, if you're familiar with that
Yes,
movie, yeah,
yes, that's
yeah,
back in the
with
day. Yeah.
Brendan Fraser. What if like some preserved beings could come forward from so that was the idea. And so obviously with the Dead Sea Squirrels, the squirrel, I mean, it just played into that, and so really well. And so Merle and Pearl are an old Jewish couple from Galilee. And Persian squirrels or Caucasian squirrels are actually native to that area of Israel. I think
Oh,
I
okay.
think they've gone extinct, or they're super rare now. But back in the day, they were actually native to that area. And so I've done a lot of research on this, by the way,
You
on
know a lot
squirrels. So
about squirrels. Yeah.
I know a lot about Mideast squirrels now. But there's other things that are completely ridiculous, and how they can talk and all that kind of stuff. But Merle and Pearl, they're an old Jewish couple, and Merle is kind of he's the more adventurous one. Pearl's the more reasonable one. But Merle had it in his mind that he wants to go to the Dead Sea because he heard you can't sink, and so that's been his thing. And so they take a little vacation. They float down the Jordan River, because of course the Sea of Galilee connects to the Dead Sea
Yeah.
via the Jordan River. So they go down the Jordan River. They spend a lovely day at the beach until it starts to get hot. And of course, it's in an area that's completely inhospitable to squirrels. They're all salted up from swimming in the water. They go into a cave to get shade and shelter, but they get lost. And of course, the salt then preserves them for millennia, in
I
this
love.
cave.
Yeah.
So they're preserved until they're found 2,000 years later by a little boy named Michael, who is on a summer trip with his dad, who's an archaeologist. So
Hmm.
Michael wanders into a cave with his best buddy Justin, who he brought with him on the summer trip, and they come across these squirrels, and they think they're super cool vacation souvenirs. And so Michael sticks them in his backpack and smuggles them back home with him to Tennessee. And he's worried that they might stink up his room, so he sticks them on a windowsill. Opens up the window, so to air them out. And it rains that night, and they rehydrate and desalinate and come back to life. So
I love.
yeah. So then of course, they speak English, and other inexplicable things. We say in the show, we say, don't question the logic too much, dear.
Yeah, I love
So and
that.
so um but yeah, so they're the kind of these wise, goofy friends that help Michael and his friends when they're dealing with modern problems as fifth graders,
Hmm.
with stories from the Bible. And so like the second episode, it's Michael's having a trouble dealing with a bully, and he wants revenge. And so Merle and Pearl take him back and tell him about the story of Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount, and the golden rule: do unto others what you want done to you. And so he's able to then apply that to his situation in the
Everyday
modern
life.
world. Yeah, so that's kind of the pattern of the books. So yeah, so that's this show in a nutshell, as they say.
It's so fun, and I
Yeah.
love this animated because that was I mean, your original vision was to see it animated, and
Yeah, yeah.
then but you had, like, the stories all written now. So the it
Yeah,
just yeah.
yeah. It was great, and kind of the thing that was a little terrifying is, I mentioned that I went to do my master's of fine arts, after a big idea too, to be able to have a terminal degree to teach. But I was able to use the program as a way to translate the book series into an animated series. So, I did the screenplay adaptations for class assignments.
Oh,
I
wow.
worked up the show Bible, which is, kind of the design style and kind of what the show is going to look like. I just did those as assignments for classes that I needed to take for my MFA. And so when I was done, when I graduated, I kind of had it ready to go as a show. But I had no idea, because I hadn't been a book writer before. I had no idea how these books would translate, like, time wise, into an
Right.
animated show. And so when I did the screenplay adaptation of the first episode, it was like 50 or 60 pages long. And the rule of thumb in screenwriting is it's 1 page per minute. And so I
Mhm.
thought, okay, the book is going to translate into a 1 hour show. And so Steve Taylor, who I was teaching with and I still teach with, who started the show there, he's a, kind of a, just legendary, Christian artist, from back
Mm.
in the day. I was a huge Steve Taylor fan in his music. And he's
Oh,
also
that's Steve Taylor.
that's Steve Taylor. Yes,
Oh,
that's
okay,
Steve Taylor.
yeah.
Yeah, "Wanna Be a Clone," Steve Taylor. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly, and we had worked together on VeggieTales. He had done songs for both the Jonah movie and the Pirates Who Don't Do Anything movie,
Oh, okay.
and he produced Newsboys for years, and
Mhm.
Newsboys did In the Belly of the Whale song for Jonah, and then he did with Peter Furler, Yo-Ho Hero, for the Pirates movie. And so, I got to be friends with Steve. And so when I left Big Idea, he's the one that, said, "Hey, have you ever thought about teaching?" And, kind of brought me into Lipscomb and, did the MFA program there and everything. But Steve was just a great creative collaborator. And so we started talking about, okay, what would it look like to, animate this book series now? And
Mhm.
so we were able to raise enough money for a pilot, and he's and but the screenplay adaptation that I did, once we got it and started to storyboard it and get it into what are called story reels for
Mhm.
animation, sort of the blueprint for what the final animated thing will look like. It was like 23 minutes, which is a perfect,
Wow.
TV half hour. And so, which was just really wild and nothing that I expected. I was thinking, okay, we're going to have to do two shows because it's going to be an hour long.
Mhm.
But all of these books ended up being almost perfect for, and it varied. And the nice thing about streaming is you don't have to have everything, like for
Right.
TV, everything has to be 22 and a half minutes. But for streaming, as long as you're close, you're fine. So everything ended up being between, 23 and a half or 23 to 27 minutes, basically, which is where where all the books translated to that. So, and then the last books, 10, 11, and 12, they got a little bit longer as I was, kind of wrapping up that particular storyline. And so 12 books actually translated into 13, in
Okay.
13 episodes. So, but yeah, by the time we animated the whole thing.
I love that because really, you could show something in a show,
Yeah.
instead you need a lot of words to write what's happening.
Right. Yes. Yes. And just a lot of, yeah. And obviously, yeah, you can say a lot with just visuals, but then if you're leaning on, internal dialogue in your book, you got to figure out a way. Okay,
Exactly.
how do I communicate that visually? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
it's so interesting. Okay, so where can people find, the show to go watch?
Yeah. So, if I back up a little bit,
Yeah.
we did a deal. We got our funding for the show through some wonderful folks. An investor out of Montana who's a medical entrepreneur. He was fantastic, just a wonderful believer. And then the folks at the Kathy family from Chick-fil-A and their
Oh, awesome.
family foundation. So just we're just so honored that they would step in beside us and help us fund this. And then we did a distribution deal through the Wonder Project, which the Wonder Project, if you're familiar with the House of David, that's on
Oh, yeah.
Amazon right now. Yeah,
We
yeah.
we're
So
watching that. We
yeah,
just
isn't it
started,
great?
like, we're at
Yeah,
episode 3 at 4, way
yeah,
4.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so neat, and so Amazon stepped alongside them and, has been in big support, and so we did our deal through the Wonder Project, and then the Wonder Project then sublicensed us to Minnow, which is a Christian kids streaming service, and that's been great. I mean, they're really a wonderful team. They're based out of Nashville here, so they've got folks all over the country, but their base is in Nashville here. So they've been super supportive, and they did a big launch for us. We did a big premiere here in Nashville back in February, and it was just amazing getting everybody out here at K-Love, the new K-Love
Yep.
studios, and just we had about 700 people show up, tons of kids, and just showed the first 3 episodes. It was awesome, and they that weekend the first 3 episodes released on Minnow streaming, and then they released 2 more every consecutive weekend until just recently at the end of March. All 13 episodes are out now. So, but it's on Minnow. It's a wonderful streaming service. They actually have all the VeggieTales stuff there too. So if you can see all your veggies, you can see all your squirrels, tons of great kids content, and we just couldn't be more thrilled with being on Minnow.
I love that, and yeah. So definitely go check out Minnow.
Yeah.
I think I need a Minnow subscription. I don't have a Minnow subscription.
Yeah,
I
it's
need to go
just
do that.
go
Go Minnow.
minnow.com. Just yeah, check it out. And it's very reasonable too. And yeah, it's that's the business model we built VeggieTales off of back in the day was, obviously home video. You make a show and you put it in a bookstore and somebody buys their cassette and takes it home, and that has all changed,
Hmm.
and it's really why, VeggieTales became, why I there was no more place for me at VeggieTales after 2016 because nobody really bought that anymore and it couldn't support the business model. But
Right.
now it's all about streaming. And so if Christians can support, these streaming services, then they, can support, great content for kids because that's kind of the business model now.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so this has launched. Do you have more plans for more books, for something else? What's happening?
Yeah, yeah. So the books have been doing really well, and have gotten great feedback on the books, and just signed a deal with Tyndale. I did a deal for 6 additional books, but now that's turned into just signed my a deal for 6 more. So there's
Okay.
12 more books coming. So left a little bit of room at the end of the first 12 books. It's a storyline that resolved over 12 books, but left some places to maybe trail it and a
Yes.
few questions unanswered. So now we've developed 12 more, like just on the broad strokes on, what that second season can look like. And I'm 2 books in. So I've written the first 2 books, and those are through copy editing. They're in illustration now. Luke McGee, who is the illustrator for the books, is working on those. He's so good. And again, my editor, Debbie King, is so great. And Linda Howard, who's the
Yes.
publisher over
Yeah.
there. My original editor, Sarah Rubio, did such a great job. And so I'm just so thankful for that team. And so those books are being worked on right now. And then, we're doing story sessions now to kind of break the outlines for the other books. So that'll be my big summer project. I'd like to get another couple, 2 or 3 more books written.
I love that, and it's so fun. So I bought multiple series to give to grandkids, to give to birthday gifts. I think before I've like you've been at, I think you were at Teach Them Diligently. I plopped down like I think 2 6-book sets. I'm like, can you please sign all these
Oh
books?
my
And
goodness. Yeah,
you're so
absolutely.
graciously signed them all. And
Yeah.
then my daughter, who's now in Poland,
Uh-huh.
she met you and she started crying because she's like, I can't believe I got to meet him. So
Oh
it's
man,
so
that's so
fun. So
awesome.
they make great gifts for birthdays or Christmas or holidays. And then now the streaming too. So you could even throw that in as a gift. That would be great
Y
for
yeah,
families.
I mean, to me, it's so cool that kids can have that experience of reading and then watching, the show, because it's, obviously there's the same characters, same storyline, but it's just a different experience and uses
Hmm.
a little bit different part of the brain. And so I just love the fact, that, I just love knowing that kids are enjoying reading and really getting into the books. So
Oh,
it's fantastic.
so good. So did you do any of the voices or anything for the
For this,
squirrels?
yes, so I'm Merle Squirrel. So yeah, I get to be
Okay,
Merle.
what's his voice? Because is it
So let's see. I'll back up a little bit. Merle Squirrel. This is Merle. So it's mostly me with maybe a little tinge of like, kind of that 1920s. So kind of feel on him. Make him feel a little bit older. So that's Merle. Not quite as distinct as the Larry voice, but that's my Merle voice. But I've been. It took me so many years to really feel comfortable. Like I can switch between
yes,
Mike and Larry like on a heartbeat, just because I've been
right.
doing it for so long. So I got to get to that same place with Merle. So,
Oh, I love it.
and people need to, it's so funny because it's like I'll do the Merle voice, and because the show's so new, not a lot of people have heard it, and so they're like,
They're
okay,
like, "Why are you talking that way?"
what's the big deal? Exactly. Whereas I do my Larry voice, they're like, that's amazing.
I know. Yeah. And you just see it. Like I could just picture all the different, like as you're talking, telling all
Uh,
the different stories, I could just picture all the pirate singers. I could picture the different Madame Blueberry or whatever. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, and I hope, I mean, obviously I just love that, and I love VeggieTales and continue to support that, but I just hope that also with squirrels,
Yes.
the squirrels to this generation, it can
Do
elicit that
that.
same kind of response. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I love it. Oh, so cool. All right. So, Mike, where can people go just to find information about whatever you're doing and
Yeah.
then get the books and find all the information for you?
Yes. So my website, MikeNawrocki.com, or DeadSeaSquirrels.com are great places to go. So,
Okay.
and I think right now, DeadSeaSquirrels.com will actually link you to the Minnow site,
Yay.
to see that. But yeah, and then my books are available on Amazon or wherever you buy books. So yeah, but thank you, Trisha, so much. It's so exciting to be here and talk with you this way. Obviously, it's an honor to be co-hosting the Bible for Kids podcast with you, but it's just kind of fun to just chat and tell you my story this way.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Trisha, thank you so much. God bless.
You too.